Well, it's good to be with you today, and we celebrate Friday of the final, essentially, week of our Easter season, coming up, of course, soon to Pentecost. And let's keep in prayer those who may be traveling, especially to this community. We have our Lady Academy graduation Mass tonight. St. Stanislaus is tomorrow, and a lot of events as we start to wind down the whirlwind that is late May at Our Lady of the Gulf, So the schools are finally starting to wrap up and many things happening. So we continue and read from Acts of the Apostles, and this reading, both of the readings that have been given to us by our church today, there's so much that we can explore. And here we encounter Paul, who has been held in custody because of the Jewish people that were upset with his preaching Christ. And so King Agrippa and Bernice, who's actually his sister, are visiting, and they visit this person Festus, the local ruler, and Festus is really confused about this whole disagreement because, as he says, he thought that Paul was, some kind of fomenter of rebellion, right? That he was like setting fire to people's houses or spray painting graffiti on the temple or something, but he's not doing that. Instead, all he's really doing is proclaiming Jesus. And the leaders are not comfortable with this. They're trying to get rid of him. And so the way it actually works out here is that Paul is a Roman citizen, and so he has privileges that the Jews would not have, ordinary Jews would not have had. And one of them was that he could be tried in Rome by the emperor, as opposed to by a lower court. And so Paul actually invokes this privilege. And if you read back a little bit from chapter 25, verse 13, you'll see that Paul actually really is really smart about it. He tries to avoid being judged by a lower court that would be more, it would be basically more run by those particular people, because they were not simply seeking to have him, removed from the territory, no Paul allowed sign. They wanted to have him executed. A theme that I'd like to go back to here briefly, how do we handle those who witness truth to us? In our fallen state, our tendency, when someone witnesses truth to us, whatever kind of truth it is, our tendency is to get angry, to get upset, to feel pained, to want to get back, to want to get revenge. When hardness of heart, which is a kind of a protracted tendency to stay in mortal sin, a tendency to resist and reject the truth repeatedly. When hardness of heart gets bad enough, sometimes we just want to kill whatever voice witnesses truth to us. It is better for us that we kill that voice and we remove it than that we change, even that we even consider the possibility of change, right? And this is unfortunately what's happening here, is these particular people are so closed off from the truth. And it's really aggravating for them, right? Because Jesus proclaims and he does miracles and he proves his veracity through these signs, as John will always call them. And then he gets killed and apparently he's gone. But then these disciples show up. And man, these disciples are doing the same kind of things. Really inconvenient when you put them in prison and then, Peter and they're out there proclaiming Christ again. And so I'm just going to say, God help us to not be to not be hard of heart, right? We should pray at the beginning of every day. And you should always make a morning offering. I'm a huge fan of a morning offering. It could take many different forms. Basically, it's along the lines of, I woke up and I'd like to offer this day to Jesus through Mary. Where I'm going to offer this day to God. I'm going to ask the angels and saints to be with me. I'll tell you something. If you don't do a morning offering, you find out what it looks like to not ask God to be with you during the day. That will probably happen a lot of the time. And it's an incredibly good practice. And we're asking that God would speak to us and penetrate our heart. And it really is, and I know I'm being almost as blunt as I could be here, but it's so much better to listen to the voices that God has put into our lives to witness truth to us while we are alive. While, as Paul says, while it's today, that we can be open to change and growth. The time for those Pharisees and scribes and all those people to change is over now, right? They have stepped into their eternity. They've been dead for a very long time. All of us one day, the time for our change and conversion will be over, and we will have stepped into our eternity. And that time to respond to the gospel will belong to the past. We will have entered into the future that we chose. I will have entered into the future that I chose. And how do I choose my future? Through my decisions, through my actions, through my works of charity, through my works of discharity, all those kind of things. So we need to take this seriously. And so now we look at our gospel just very briefly. And this is from the kind of strange story of, that Jesus encounters the apostles after his resurrection on the water, and then they catch all these fish, and then he's already cooking fish, when they come to the shore, and Jesus and Peter have this dialogue. It's a very fishy story. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, it's like there's a lot of fish in it. And so Jesus tells Peter, he asks Peter to make this statement of faith, right? And the statement of faith 3 times that that he would tend his sheep, feed his lambs, tend his sheep, is kind of an undoing, it's the fathers said, of his triple denial during the Passion. But it just goes back, that God is trying to change you and me, not just so that we can be holy, so we can be okay, but so that we can go out to the people that are also not okay, right? As the saint said, God doesn't want anybody to come to heaven without bringing at least 5 people maybe along with him. That's something that the saints would say sometimes, that each of us needs to be bringing at least 5 people, some other people with us to heaven. And so may God help us to do that, to be people that can be open to truth and bring others also to that truth that is eternal.